right. You know what I love about this podcast, Ursula, is that we don't have a 12-minute long musical introduction or something along those lines. I don't get the purpose. It's about 6 seconds long, and usually we just start talking halfway through it, so it doesn't really much matter. But I do have to mention Health IQ. And guys, I have bad news. You're going to die. I don't know when, but it's going to happen eventually, I promise you. The good news is that you can get life insurance to help the people that you love. The better news is that if you go to healthiq.com/catalyst, they can get you way lower rates based on the fact that you are weightlifters or lifter of weights and are consequently healthy, because they have the science to prove that to these insurance companies. So they'll hook you up. healthiq.com/catalyst. And anything else we need to mention? You need to plug your competition.
We just did it. No, we just did it Saturday.
Oh, you need to talk about your competition, how great it was?
It was great.
It was great. So
I've been traveling, as I'm sure some people have. Well, maybe not everybody knows, but
I was going to say we need to.
Maybe nobody knows. Everybody. I mean, what do people really care about my life?
They care.
I've been traveling for like a month straight. So if you're looking for cheery enthusiasm, you're not going to find it here.
Well, this is the wrong podcast to begin with, but it's just going to be even worse today. But you guys all need to congratulate Ursula, who is the new IWF vice president as of last week. So congratulations to our very own Ursula.
Well, I'm one of the vice presidents. They have a seat now reserved on the executive board for a vice president and an executive board member for women. And so I'm the first woman that has ever been elected vice president in the history of our sport.
Man, just kicking down doors and breaking glass ceilings over there.
And try not to die while I'm doing it.
Well, yeah, that would be less of an accomplishment if you died in the process.
Immediately after, I felt like death the next day.
Yes. Well, that's okay. We're gonna soldier on.
But I'll hopefully get it together by next Sunday. I go back to Tokyo
for our God
meeting. Yeah.
It's a good thing you have nothing else going on in your life.
Yeah, right. It's a good thing I don't have like a child and a family and a couple of jobs.
And athletes. And this dumb podcast that we have to always figure out when to do. Oh, it's weightlifting life, Ursula.
Yep, it is.
We did this to ourselves.
We touted it. Now we got to live it, you know? Way to go, Greg.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and see if we can help these people out, even though you feel like death warmed over and I'm just my normal feeling like shit anyway. For no specific reason, just generally.
Just cause.
All right. Eric says, hi, Ursula and Greg. I'm curious on your thoughts on wide grip jerks, where they have a place, mobility to achieve it, and any downsides or risks. Backstory if useful. I'm a tall masters lifter with long forearms. Shoulder width grip is fine for the clean and rack position, but I would always have to use a false grip on the jerk with my elbows far in front. This led to sloppy jerks, but trying to hold a full grip would cause wrist and elbow pain. I was always curious about the wide grip technique of a few Colombian lifters and spent 2 to 3 months on wide grip band work. Tie a band to a loaded bar, hold the bar in a rack position, and tinker around with it at varying grip widths. It has worked great, and I can finally get a solid grip with elbows under the bar. I feel much stronger under the bar, too. I do have to give a good pop out of the clean to move my hands far enough, about 4 inches out, so my ring finger is over the ring of the bar. Would love to just slap my hands out, but my forearms are just silly long. Happy with the improvement and will keep plugging away at it. I just haven't heard much about wide grip jerks in the US and I'm interested if you've suggested this route to other lifters. If it's not just a plain awful idea that will give me cancer, or any additional mobility or technique tips would be most appreciated. Congratulations, Ursula, on the election. Oh, there you go. And Greg, on your team success. Love the podcast and appreciate all you both do for the sport. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I'm sure Ursula has too, but I've talked about wide grip jerks in the past in various places, and they absolutely have a place, and they have a place with people like you who basically can't get into a solid, comfortable rack position with a narrower grip, or can't get into a solid overhead position with a narrower grip. And the rack position, yeah, it's limited by mobility to some extent, but even if you have perfect mobility, it can still be limited by the way you're built. Like, so if you have long forearms relative to your upper arm or vice versa, you're probably, no matter how mobile you are, you're never going to get into kind of the textbook standard optimal rack position, and that's fine. You're still a good person, but you do have to find a workaround that's going to give you kind of what's best for you, what's optimal in those circumstances. The couple things to be concerned about, I would say, is overhead. The wider you go, technically, the less strong you are, the less structurally secure that position is. But there is definitely kind of a threshold there, because like we were talking before the show, a lot of times you'll have people say, well, when I go wider, I feel stronger overhead, like Eric, you've said here. And typically,
get a better position. They can get the bar over their actual shoulder.
Yeah. So if you have limited, T-spine and shoulder mobility, that narrower grip is going to be very difficult for you. So you can't get into a solid, secure, structurally supported position. So of course that wider grip is going to feel stronger, and it will be stronger for you because you can actually get that structural support, kind of that bone on bone structure there, rather than just constantly fighting the entire time muscularly to keep the bar in position. But don't misinterpret that to mean that the wider your grip is, the stronger one is overhead, because that's not actually true.
To the contrary.
Right.
You support less as you go wider.
And I think that'll become obvious to most people if you simply compare, how much weight you can hold overhead with a jerk grip versus a snatch grip. Not necessarily in the bottom of a squat, just period. If someone said, lift this bar 1 inch out of a rack and hold it as long as possible, you're going to find that going narrower, the closer your arms are to vertical, as long as it's not totally limited by mobility, is going to be a lot stronger and more comfortable.
It's less muscular effort overall.
Right.
I realize, and it's less stress on the wrists.
Yes. So and elbows and shoulders. And elbows,
right? We get all of
the whole thing
loaded. Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely, it sounds like you've kind of found that spot where you have, gotten a rack position that works for you. You can get your elbows under the bar, you get your hands under the bar so you can get it moving well. And a width that is giving you a more comfortable position overhead, and that's secure overhead. So you're set. I would say don't go wider just for the sake of going wider. You're not gonna find some like magical end of the rainbow position where it's like, holy shit, now I can jerk 220 all of a sudden because I moved out another inch. The suggestion I would give you is to make sure you're doing some supplemental strength work overhead with that wider grip. And even in that wider rack position, doing like jerk dip squats or dips or even drives, something like that, just to really make sure that you are maximizing your mobility in that position and the strength of your shoulders to kind of keep them elevated and protracted in that rack position, and not putting any undue stress on them in such an extreme position. And it sounds like you said 2 or 3 months to kind of get out there, so that's good. It wasn't just overnight you went 6 inches wider. So to anyone else wanting to give this a try, I would say that too is move out incrementally. Don't just go way out to an extreme position, because that is a great way to get some elbow and shoulder and wrist problems. What else do you suggest there? Well,
you asked about the meet this weekend. There was this guy named Hayden who's a thrower. And he basically, walked in his first meet and power snatched 125, but like standing straight up. Clean and jerked 65, I believe, or 60 or 65, 60. Again, catching it, a little bit of a fight because of the rack position. And he has, and it's just kind of ironic because his problem is similar to what you just explained. And also besides mobility, having been a thrower, he's a big guy, he's quite muscle bound. this same meet, Mark Henry came over to say hi with the Todds at the end of the day. And he was a kind of a classic example of somebody who has a long radius ulna to humerus length and had problems in the rack position. And I can remember, because I used to train with him when he first started, and this is Mark, he would have to do an adjustment. And I can't tell you how many lifts in training he went to go do the adjustment, especially when he was first learning it, and would lose the bar. So a really, easy clean would lead to a missed lift, because you've actually introduced another element that is another movement in which you could potentially miss a lift besides the actual, clean and jerk, which are, kind of fraught with their own potential. So, it's one thing that you have to realize. Whenever you do something to, accommodate mobility issues, you're usually, it's some sort of a trade-off. And Greg, enunciated all of the other problems that come with it in terms of the loading and stress because of the wider grip and the lack of having a direct vertical force being placed onto the structure. You also introduce this other movement in which you could potentially miss a lift. So you have to get really good and pretty precise. So if you're coming out of a clean and you go to adjust and the bar is moving just a little bit forward, like you're moving forward on the front of your foot as you're standing, that bar is going to pop off forward. So you have to learn to make sure that you either stand up and then do your adjustment, which can feel hard if you just grind it out of a clean. It's just something to think about. Like, you don't want to just say, oh, that's easier, I'm just going to stop working on mobility. I don't think that Eric did, but I'm just saying, it's not something you want to do just because it looks cool, because you really do end up introducing another potential element if you're actually popping the bar off the chest to get that adjustment. There are other people who do the adjustment by leaving the bar on their chest, standing there upright, and then moving their hands. Again, they're under tension with the bar longer than somebody who doesn't have to do that. Even though they maybe minimize the risk of lifting, of missing the weight because they're doing an actual physical thrust of the bar and moving their hands that way, just the fact that they're sitting there with the bar on their chest longer while they move their hands puts them under tension longer. So those are just a couple of things to think about. It's not the most desirable route to take, but it has its benefits. But all of those have some sort of a trade-off. So just understand that. And that's kind of the technique in weightlifting, period. You're doing things to enhance one area. In this case, it's probably a good trade-off, right? Because now you can actually hold more weight in that position overhead for you. Maybe not the most weight, but you're probably never going to jerk the most weight that you can hold overhead.
I wish I could.
But back to this Hayden guy that was at our meet. I actually, after the meet, he posted his lifts, and I was watching them. And I watched them, but I was marshalling, so I was kind of behind him. And as I was watching his lifts, I noticed, I was like, God, that looks just so awkward and uncomfortable in the rack. And part of it's because he's just tight in the rack. But there was no adjustment for the jerk, and you're just looking at this guy thinking, God, if he would adjust, because he still had his elbows pretty high. But here's a guy with a giant chest that could easily pull his hands down and his elbows down to jerk. So he's actually going to come by this week, and we're going to work on moving his hands out a little bit and changing his elbow position for the jerk. And the jerk that he missed at the meet, I'm pretty sure he'll jerk easily with those adjustments. It was just an awkward position, and they're looking at, like Greg said, kind of the textbook style of doing things, and that's what he's trying to fit into. And every once in a while, you just notice on someone, either because of their anthropometrics or mobility or some combination of both, it's, we have to make the adjustment for them. And we've talked before about individualization and technique, but we're always taking into account the biomechanical losses that occur. And in this case, it's the fact that you can't carry as much weight overhead with the wide grip as you can with the narrow grip. So you lose that, but you get some jerks in, and meanwhile.
Yeah, the one thing I want to add, though, is with regard to the adjustment in the rack position, don't make the mistake of believing that being able to stand still and simply move your hands out is a skill that you can work towards. It's not. It really is entirely based on your build. if you are built in such a way that when the bar is resting in the rack position, your arms are of the exact length that there isn't a bunch of tension on them, then you can slide your hand out, right? There's nothing preventing that. For most people, though, in that position, there's going to be a lot of tension, pushing the arms down. It doesn't mean the arms are supporting the bar, but it means that in order to have the hands under the bar, they're getting depressed by the weight of that bar, which means you can't just slide out. So don't think you're bad at weightlifting because you can't do that. 95+% of people are going to have to elevate the bar at least somewhat off the shoulders in order to reposition the hands. And like Ursula said, it's you have to use the technique of adjustment that's going to work best for you, and that can change even based on the situation. And so I always teach people, the ideal situation is that you use the upward momentum you've already created on the bar when you're recovering from the clean to just drive that bar up just enough, hopefully only like 1 inch or something. You don't want to do like a Boevsky and drive it all the way up to your forehead, so high it looks like you have to grab it and pull it back down out of the sky. Just enough to
or leave everybody thinking, God, he should have just jerked it.
Right. He probably would have if that were legal.
Yeah, right.
But basically the more separation you get between the bar and the shoulders, the more opportunity for fucking up you're creating, right? The more opportunity, you may drive the bar forward, you may actually push it too far back and start stumbling, or you choke yourself out or off to one side. So if the more quickly you can do it with as little elevation as possible, the better off you're going to be, as long as it's an adequate amount to actually position your hands. If you have a bad clean where you receive it a little bit forward or something like that, and you have to catch a double bounce, or you're grinding up, it may be easier in that situation to stand all the way up, kind of sort yourself out for a moment, and then kind of dip and pop to get that bar up enough to move out, instead of trying after a clean like that to do it all in one movement. So you do need to find the optimal way to do it for you generally, and then be willing to kind of be flexible, because sometimes shit goes sideways and you got to be able to adapt instead of just dropping the bar and crying. Okay, I think that covered pretty much all of his questions, did it not?
I think you only really had one.
Well... Actually, now looking back, there wasn't a single question mark, so technically he didn't have a single question, if you want to really be a shithead about it. Okay. Abby says, why is it important to have loud feet when performing snatch and clean and jerk? I started lifting as a CrossFitter and then moved over to all weightlifting about 18 months ago. I definitely move my feet when lifting, but I land quietly. Attempts to fix this tend to throw off my lifts. Just trying to understand why the audible landing is so important in the sport. Thanks.
Well, first of all, congratulations, Abby, to becoming a full-time, full-fledged weightlifter.
Full-on weightlifter.
That's a stat. That's a stat.
I'm curious. I want to hear in the comments who gets that reference, full on. Because I'd be really surprised if anyone knows what that's from. And if they do, we're probably friends. Well, how is that snotty? Do you know what it's from?
I doubt no, because I don't watch movies. I watch documentaries, and I'm like 99% sure it's from a movie.
Documentaries are movies.
Well, I don't watch dumb movies.
Who's snotty now?
Yeah, but everybody knew that I was.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. You're just living up to expectations.
Yes, that's right.
All right. I'm still trying to pretend publicly that I'm a nice person when really I am a shithead too.
Well, did you see the comments? They were like, Ursula's meaner than Greg.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, somebody said that. I was like, liar.
See?
They really don't know us.
My ruse
they really
is
don't
working.
know us. Yeah, good job.
We're both actually really nice, but only if you're nice to us first. Okay,
very limited number of people. No, that's not true.
Abby, we're going to stop talking about ourselves now and get back to your question.
We're going to talk about you. First of all, I'm going to say, Abby, I'm a ninja weightlifter too. I don't have very loud feet. And I'm glad nobody ever told me I had to, because it probably would have fucked me up too.
Yeah, well, the reason I chose this question is because I think it's an important one, because there are, it's not a simple answer. Well, it's a simple answer, but it's not a short answer. So first of all, it's not necessarily important to have loud feet when snatching and clean and jerking. I've written a few articles about this, I believe, because it comes up so often, when I do seminars or I get, emails about it, whatever. A couple of things to consider. Number one is whether or not you're even lifting and moving your feet. And I think we've talked about this in a past episode, haven't we?
Absolutely.
I'm sure we have. There've been so many and it's been so long, I don't really remember.
We talked about it in the course that we taught together.
Yes, of course. But let me put it this way. If you lift your feet off the platform in order to reposition them, there should be some kind of sound. Doesn't have to be loud necessarily, but it should be audible when you reconnect your foot. The reason being, that indicates that you have replaced your foot flat on the ground rather than landing on the balls of the foot and then rolling back to your heel, which is really what we would prefer. So in other words, we don't want noise because you're lifting your feet as high as possible and then stomping them as hard as possible and trying to create the noise. The noise is not the goal in and of itself. It's kind of a diagnostic that lets lets your coach know, lets whoever's watching know that you landed flat-footed, which, if you're going to lift and move your feet, is, at least in my opinion, very important. And for a number of reasons, in and of itself, landing on the balls of your feet and rolling down is problematic, but it also tends to indicate that you've kind of swept your feet backwards rather than replanted them directly under your center of mass, and that should be obvious why that's a problem. If you do not lift your feet all the way, like you are someone who has developed the ability to kind of slide outward and you're very consistent in getting your feet in the right place, and you're also able to finish your pull as well as you need to, change directions well, all of those other things, then I wouldn't worry about it, especially if it's causing you a ton of problems trying to change it. So the key is that I will never force someone to do it. If there's someone who naturally is better snatching or cleaning without really lifting the feet significantly. But if someone does lift the feet and they do land on the balls of the feet, then that's something we're going to fix. What I would say, though, with the jerk, if you're doing a split jerk, you should be able to hear the front foot. Your back foot's going to land on the balls of the foot. That's what we want. That front foot, if you can't even hear that, either you're lifting in moccasins or you're landing improperly on that front foot, because you do want that front foot to land flat. So that's one exception, I guess I would make, that if you are split jerking, not push jerking, then I would expect to hear that front foot land, kind of irrespective of your individual lifting style. Well, I don't know, Ursula, what do you think?
Oh, no, I think obviously that's right.
Obviously, that's right.
I think more, it's not like one of those things where louder is better necessarily. But, you should hear the feet. She says she lands quietly. To me, I don't make a whole lot of noise. You can hear my feet, but they're not like, bah, really. And nobody ever made me make the stomping sound just for just for the fuck of it, right? So, but you see where people tell them to make louder feet, and all they do is flex their hip and drive their foot down harder.
Right.
They're not actually, sometimes it even truncates the jump because they're trying so hard to just move their feet, and they're not even doing the rest of the lift. It should, as Greg said, be a result of fast, hard feet and landing flat. But it, in and of itself, if somebody else makes a louder sound than you, they don't win. It's not any prize for it. But I think some coaches think like that by itself is important. And I think that's where you run into problems, when you're not understanding why you should hear the feet.
Yeah.
But if you come to the ball of the foot and you don't jump really high off the ground to be able to hear the sound when your feet hit back on the ground, or you don't intentionally drive real hard, they might be a little bit softer. You want fast feet. I don't come up off the ground that much. I kind of come to the ball. On all of my lifts, I come up about the same, and that's because I'm adjusting how hard I jump as the weight gets heavier. So it's somewhat consistent. And so my feet kind of make the same amount of noise. You see a lot of people who with the real light weights, they make a whole lot of noise because they're jumping real high. And then when the weights get heavier, they don't make as much. And so then you think, well, that was just some gratuitous fucking sound that wasn't doing anybody any good. They're going to end up with fucking shin splits. But anyways, that's just what goes through my head. Another thing to consider is what kind of shoes are you using? Because for a little while, like a minute and a half maybe, I was using these CrossFit Reebok. Shut up, Greg.
I didn't say a word.
I know, but I read your
did.
mind. I read your mind. And
are you trying to make me mad?
No, on purpose. No, they were just really a soft shoe, and I could never hear my feet. And it was like, did she even snatch? All of the bars overhead, she must have. But with my Adidas, I get a little bit more sound because it's, they have the wooden heel because they're from the 90s. Shut up, Greg.
What? Those are the greatest ones.
They certainly are, but I thought you were going to make some reference to my age.
I would never do such a thing.
Yeah.
Have I ever made you feel bad about your age?
No, not bad. I think you've pointed it out. And then if I felt bad, it would have been inherently my own problem. But I think that's it.
Yeah, so make sure you're doing the rest of the lift well, and you're getting your feet into the position they need to be in, and then more than likely you don't need to worry about it. And yeah, if you are lifting in moccasins instead of good solid soled weightlifting shoes, then you need to fix that problem. I think I yelled at everybody about silly footwear a couple episodes ago. Okay.
Well, the Reeboks were really comfortable for like doing seminars because I could walk around in them all day long, and they had a looser toe box. Mm-hmm. But for actual lifting, they weren't as good for me because they had a looser toe box.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to wear a hybrid shoe, like you're a CrossFitter or something, and you want something that kind of does both fairly well, then you're going to be stuck with a shoe that doesn't do any one thing really well. And that's fine if that's what you're looking for, but yeah, you can't expect it to function the same way.
I'd be curious what shoes Abby wears.
Well, maybe she'll let us know somehow. Yeah. Message in a bottle. Okay. Megan says, my power snatch
Send smoke signals, Abby. We're waiting.
My power snatch is pretty shitty compared to my snatch. Percentage-wise, I can do around 77% of my 1-rep max.
Where are you at? You power. Skipped Marina.
I'm waiting for the end for Marina because she has 16 questions.
Yeah, she's got 3. Okay.
Yeah, well, I've told you a million times not to exaggerate. I have similar ratios for power clean to clean. I feel like as the power snatch gets heavier and heavier, I should just be getting lower and lower. But instead, I seem to go from solid power position to full snatch with no middle ground. Any ideas what I'm doing wrong and what I can do to fix it?
Okay. I wouldn't consider it wrong, but definitely you're not. If you're going from like a high power snatch into a full snatch and you're not like gradually lowering, you're probably turning over fast on the power snatches, and then when it gets a little bit heavier, you don't trust it. And so you're not able to meet the bar halfway and you just go all the way in. That's obviously what you're doing, which means that the turnover in those middle, in the like 80 to 82, 85% is probably too slow.
Yeah.
That's how you're going to get it. That's how you're going to be able to meet it.
Yeah. So my thing is, I'm not always a huge fan of power snatches to begin with.
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem so much, except for it would indicate that in the 82 to 85% range where you should still be able to get like a borderline power snatch. Yeah. She's just dropping all the way in. So the bar is higher than what she's sitting.
The way I look at this, so for me, a power clean is almost nearly always a valuable exercise for a weightlifter. Power snatch, I can go either way. I think it really depends on the lifter whether or not that's effective for them or useful. And so...
I mean, I would say that the opposite problem is a bigger problem. I mean, like not being able to power snatch isn't a big deal. what would be a problem is not being able to snatch.
Right. Yeah. If you were power snatching 95% of your snatch, then I would be worried. But this, I'm with Ursula. I'm not super concerned about it. And the way I look at this is that people are successful at snatching for different reasons or different combinations of reasons. And, you have a certain segment of the snatching population who are very successful at snatches, not because they're good at elevating the bar, but because they're good at timing the transition at the top and really moving under the bar very well. And for someone like that, you're never going to have a really high power snatch to snatch ratio, and that's fine. It doesn't indicate that there's something wrong with you. It could just indicate that you are the kind of person who is successful at snatching because of your ability to move under the bar. So that doesn't, at the same time, that doesn't mean that you don't necessarily need to work on better elevation and acceleration of the bar, or like Ursula said, maybe a faster turnover at times. It just means that it's not something you need to like retire from weightlifting over. It's not some kind of a deal breaker. Now, if
that's not a given either. What I said isn't necessary. I mean, that's a potential. I would have to see her, because like for me, I was never a really great power snatcher. I learned how to power snatch and then I got to really like it. But, I would catch things in a power snatch position and then I would just keep sitting. Like I really just didn't have the desire, inclination to stop it at that point. I was like, okay, well, I did the requisite higher pull and found the bar, but now that I'm here, it's just more comfortable to write it down and come back out.
Right.
And I would do that.
Well,
and they'd say, oh, it's a miss power snatch. I'm like, well, it doesn't matter because it was a beautiful snatch.
Yeah, who gives a shit? It's not a miss. It's still a snatch.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's a good point too, is that, and I've tried to make this point over and over, and this is one of the things I talk about, I feel like a lot, that gets people really confused, or they like have some weird kind of emotional reaction to it and hate it. But with your lighter snatches, even if you do tone down the force a little bit, like Ursula always is talking about, being able to appropriately apply force for what you're trying to do and the weight that's on the bar, you're going to end up receiving it, relatively high, but in one continuous motion, sitting all the way into that squat. It's not like you receive every single one of your snatches at 2 inches above the bottom of a squat. And so you could be very good at pulling the bar high, turning it over and fixing it in the overhead position in a relatively high position. But then, like Ursula, not being comfortable or strong in the very specific way enough to, stop that squat at a position very close to parallel, which is, mechanically the weakest position of the squat you're going to find. And so that, like I said, that's not really a deal breaker. That's really not the end of the world. I wouldn't lose any sleep over it. I would look at the rest of the lift and be sure, figure out what potentially is limiting that power snatch. And if it is something, some kind of technical problem, or even if, an issue with underdeveloped, ability to elevate the bar, whatever the case is, that you can work on that. And if it's not, then don't worry about it. Don't lose sleep over it. Just be yourself. Okay. Is that an adequate answer for Megan?
That's quite verbose. I think it's enough.
Quite verbose. Okay. Well, we're not really known for being super concise on this show.
She says, what can I do to fix it? Like, if you really wanted to get better at finding the bar and fixing it, I would do
power snatches,
snatch balance, a snatch balance, and work on like catching the bar at halfway, to develop the strength in that position to receive. Because if you do pull it high enough and you just don't have comfort in that middle position between a quarter squat and a full squat, that should help. And then once you get to an adequate weight with that, so that would fix it, but to what end? Would it mean you snatched more? Maybe not. And if it doesn't, then who gives a shit? Like,
to what end? What's the fucking point in any of this? Yeah. Let's be honest.
Shut up. No, would it actually increase her snatch? It might not. Yeah,
exactly. There's an article on our website I wrote a few years ago about the power snatch specifically, and basically kind of cautioning people, because people tend to get really carried away with the power snatch and like, I have to snatch, power snatch, 85% of my snatch or 88% or, whatever they've been told. And they end up completely changing the movement. And, they receive the bar, sitting the hips way back, leaning the chest way forward, in order to force themselves under a bar while technically not sitting below a parallel squat. And it completely defeats the purpose and creates bad habits. It's like a low bar overhead squat. So, you be aware of that and make sure you understand, like Ursula said, kind of why you're doing what you're doing, and make sure there is a good purpose for it, not just this idea of, having to fit your lifts into these ratios that someone has told you are like mathematically correct.
I would say 77% is not bad. I mean, we usually go for between 80 and 85. So, I mean, she's...
Yeah, I'm looking at low 80s
who are
usually.
More comfortable with the full, so have a deeper squat position. Usually we see them, with a little bit lower. So, I mean, she's obviously way more comfortable in her overhead squat. So I'm not surprised that hers is a few percent lower. I don't think it's so far out of the range to be that concerned about, or to be concerned about at all. I mean, you get somebody who has a shallower squat, theirs has to be in the mid 80s, because they don't they're pull oriented, not squat oriented. So, by the way, Matt Bruce says hi. Oh, I was totally paying attention to you. I was texting with him.
I used to really like watching Matt lift in the mid 2000s.
Well, I mean, talk about, quads. All those Hatch boys used to come in. I remember, he would cycle them through. You'd see the next guy coming in with these freaking giant quads. They were squatters.
Yeah. Yes. I still remember, I want to say it was the American Open in Mobile. So like, I don't know, 2010 or 11. Oh, no, sure. It was later than that, maybe 9. I don't know.
Is there?
It was not a super well attended one, I believe, but I was kind of sitting in the back. It was the
one with all of the windows on the backside, right? That was the one that they had the video of Emmy that she just posted.
It was the one where there was a CrossFit competition happening right next to it.
Okay, that's not the one.
And like the PA was totally, they were like competing with the PAs. It was a little obnoxious.
I think that was Natalie's first competition back, right after her hip thing. I remember coaching her there, and there being like, I don't know, the competition for CrossFit was called Fire Water or whatever, something fire.
That's weird. Maybe. I don't know. They all blend together at this point. It was the one where the stage was built up on a bunch of plywood, but it was like super soggy, like everybody was sinking. It was not a good stage. But in any case, I was sitting in the back, like probably the back row of chairs waiting for something, I don't know. And Gail Hatch comes and sits down like one chair over. And for those of you who don't know who Coach Hatch is, he's like one of the most physically intimidating human beings on earth. The guy's like 7'6", and he always has his baseball cap pulled super low over his eyes. He always has his button-up shirt, top button buttoned. And I mean, this is the guy who I remember one of the first stories I heard about him was he was walking down the street. He's from Louisiana, and someone stole a lady's purse, and he chased the guy down and like beat the shit out of him and got the purse back for her. He was like just sitting right next to me and, kind of said hi. I was just like shitting my pants. The guy was like the most intimidating human being on earth, but really, really cool guy. He was an ABA player, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then got screwed when the NBA came in. So anyway, that has absolutely nothing to do with
no, it does, because he coached. He probably, I think he had it was almost like a mill of really high level male lifters that he would churn out. I mean, he had some female lifters too, like Sam Poeth was originally one of his lifters.
Yep.
From Brandon, there was Brandon Baker, there was Blair Lebrano, Matt Bruce, and if you go back even further than that, I'm trying to remember all their names. I can't. I'll just remember a lot of them had a B in it. I thought, that's so weird. Like, they all seem to have a B in their name. It's true. But there was, Brett Bryan was the first one that I knew of his lifters, and he was on the Olympic team, and then the whole series started. So like at every stage of my career, I could remember there would be like a new male lifter that would come up whenever the other one would make the world team or whatever, and the last one in that line was Matt Bruce.
Yeah. I remember him being like a 77, and if you didn't have if he wasn't standing next to anything where you could get an idea of scale, he looked like a 94 just because he was so piped out. The guy was freaking jacked. Anyway.
And he's talking about Matt, not
Matt. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure Coach Hatch was pretty jacked too at some point.
Yeah. Well, he was an imposing figure for sure. I mean, he's always so sweet to me.
Oh, he's a super nice guy.
I never got that. But my first nationals, the first nationals that I won in 1992 was at his place. And so he always, recalls that. I remember when he's got that Southern accent. So,
oh, boy.
Anyways, good old Coach Hatch.
Yes. All right. Let's get to Marina's list here of questions. See what we can do. Hi there. First off, I want to say that I really enjoy your podcast. I find them helpful and entertaining. I do have a few questions, if that's okay. Of course that's okay, Marina. That's the whole point of this show. That's what we do. we don't want to have to come up with content on our own. That was the whole reason we went this direction. Okay, number 1. Is jumping backward in the snatch or clean a problem? Would you elaborate on lifters that barely move their feet when receiving the bar versus ones that seemingly jump or jump backwards? Pros and cons. We'll probably do a quick one on that because we've talked about that before in past episodes. Number 2, I have 2 lifters that have pretty similar vertical bar paths in the snatch. One maintains a much more vertical torso throughout the lift and keeps the bar very close with bent arms on the turnover. The other has a very exaggerated lay back position and finish, but is quick and manages to seemingly pull the bar close, even though her arms are only slightly bent. Which is better, or is it just a stylistic difference? This is a good one. 3. Keeping the bar close on the turnover has been very difficult for me, and I'm sure many others. I think I have a good position right to the hip and make good contact and know that the bar needs to stay close, quote, as if I can smell it as it passes my nose, but I cannot seem to execute the movement even at light weights. Is there any help you might be able to offer? Thank you in advance for your time. So let's just kind of go really quick on this number 1, because we have talked about that in a previous episode. I'm sure you can find it, Marina. Jumping backwards, not necessarily a problem if you do it the right way. In other words, if your whole body and the bar as a unit move back the same amount together and you land with your feet directly under your center of mass, so you're balanced, then you're fine. As far as barely moving the feet or jumping backwards, we kind of talked about that a little bit before.
Earbuds.
Huh?
I'm sorry. Hello?
Yes. Yeah, we're still going. We're carrying on without you while you're taking care of your administrative duties there in the office. So the amount of foot movement again is going to kind of depend on what works best for the athlete. Just as examples, you're looking at, say, like the Chinese lifters tend to slide the feet out more than lift and replant, versus more of the kind of rushed in Eastern European lifters, especially these days, tend to lift pretty dramatically and then replant. One is not necessarily better than the other, but one will be more or less effective for each athlete. So go back to the previous episode. It should be right in the title, jumping backward in the snatch or something like that. So you should be able to find it, no problem. Okay. Ursula has evidently gotten her shit sorted out, at least to a minimal threshold. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see if we can get through this with her still here. All right. Well, what you missed, Ursula, was that I answered question number 1 as quickly and concisely as possible, and basically told Marina and everyone else to go look at a previous episode that we talked about this jumping backwards stuff.
Can I say something just in short? Because, when we look at different pull paths, there's a particular pull path in which the bar never recrosses the metatarsal phalangeal joint line, which is where the bar is basically starting when you look at where the bar is over your foot when you start the pull, hopefully. And if the whole bar path moves in towards you, but then stays going back, and like Greg had mentioned, with you and the bar moving backwards, then it's generally an acceptable bar path. It's still like a slight S-curve, but it's not recrossing that line. And so then that causes the jump back. But if that's how you apply force to the bar, and that's as long as the whole unit is moving together. And there's another kind of conventional, wisdom idea that you shouldn't jump more than half a foot length back. So if you're jumping back like a foot and a half, like your foot length and a half, that's excessive. There's definitely going to be then an inefficiency that's caused by that, in terms of you have to displace the bar a longer distance, period.
Yeah, exactly.
So, other things. Okay.
Well, and you can get a lot more of that. We talked about that for probably at least 20 minutes in a previous episode. So you can get all the details and good stuff there. All right. So number 2, this, the farther back you lean, the less your arms will need to bend in order to keep the bar close to you as you're moving under the bar. So, I mean, you can picture that position leaning really far back. The bar is still going to be in front of you, basically at the vertical plane of the front of your hips. So that means your arms have to be longer in order to reach that. So if you pulled your arms, like kind of pulled straight back, it'd be pulling the bar backward over, relative to your foot. So you wouldn't want to do that anyway, even if you could. Versus being more vertical in that finish position, you do have to bend the arms more in order to basically upright row yourself down before turning the bar over all the way to prevent the bar from moving away. And now that I say that all out loud, I don't know how clear that is. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about, Ursula?
I do.
Okay. Well, that's all I need to know. So yeah,
it's really about just you and I.
Yeah. We probably shouldn't even record this. We should just have a conversation to just tell each other how smart we are.
Yeah, we used to do that. It worked fine. And then I had this bright idea that we should talk to others. So in terms of, because the question at the end is this a stylistic difference? I would say it's a stylistic difference rooted, and I've had this discussion, I know Greg and I have, in seminars, in the car, and wherever, about impulse. So if you've got like a fast twitch, so this is a physiological difference that might dictate then a stylistic difference. So if you have an athlete that is really fast twitch and can generate a lot of force over a little time, they may not lay back on the bar very much. They have a very vertical looking pull. And so those are basically just fast twitch. Most weightlifters are fast twitch, but they're faster. So they can generate a lot of speed and acceleration without having, and the bar catches flight and it's accelerating, so they have time to get under. They don't have to keep pulling on the bar. So we're looking at force over time, which is why I mentioned the word impulse. So somebody who cannot generate as much force in a short period of time might generate force over a longer period of time. And those people generally pull on the bar longer, so you'll see that lay back before they go in. And so the stylistic difference is really tied to a physiological difference in their ability to generate force over time. Does that make sense, Greg?
Yes.
Okay,
more impulsive people versus less impulsive people. Yeah, I would add to that too that it also is somewhat dependent, that position is going to be somewhat dependent on whether someone is kind of more hip dominant or leg dominant in the pull, or balanced. In other words, so the more kind of leg dominant you are, so typically people who have somewhat shorter legs relative to longer torsos, very strong legs, strong squatters, they're typically going to have a somewhat more vertical body position when they finish the pull. And then someone who is a little more hip dominant will tend to lay back a little more in that finish. It's not true across the board, but it's a fairly decent correlation there.
And there's also then a relation to that jumping back.
Right.
That first question.
Well, yeah, but theoretically, even if you lay back more, that shouldn't in and of itself force you to move backward, because you should still be doing that, staying balanced over the foot as much as possible. So it would depend on how you do that. If you took someone with a more vertical finish position, and then had them change nothing but pull their shoulders farther back, then they'd be imbalanced backward and they'd end up jumping backwards. So the idea is that you're still trying to balance the entire system no matter that finish position. But yes, if you have someone who is really, really leaning back, there's definitely, it's much easier to end up jumping backward then.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh my God. We learned nothing from that last experience 5 minutes ago. It's a good thing you guys don't pay for this podcast.
Okay, motherfucker.
Oh my God, Ursula, just turn the fucking phone off. I don't know why you make it so complicated.
I like it like that.
Your strategy for this phone thing is just to like sit there and hope that it doesn't ring.
Okay, I turned it off.
Holy fuck.
Are you happy? Are you happy? The chances of me remembering to turn it back on are going to be really low, and then...
Oh my God. I know for a fact you have a cell phone because I text you on it all the time. It's not as if you're unreachable.
What if it runs out of battery? I don't know.
Oh my God. Well, then you'll probably die in your house and no one will know for 3 weeks and your dog will eat you.
That is so awful.
Just kidding. Dogs don't do that. It's only cats. Okay. Dogs are too loyal. Cats are just hungry. All right, this last question. We'll see if we can get through this last question without the phone ringing again.
Can you tell that Greg and I are both dog people and don't like cats?
No, I like cats fine. I just like dogs better.
No, I mean, that's nightmare material. When I was staying with Court and Colin, I mean, I don't, and I know that makes me sound like an awful person for all you people who love kitties, and I'm really, truly sorry, but I love dogs, and I don't like little yappy dogs. They're cute and all, but get them away. I like big dogs, like dogs that are substantial, like horse dogs.
Right. I was going to say, your dog is like the size of a Clydesdale.
Yes, and that's what I like. So I like, I don't like little yappy animals. And that puts cats, even though they don't yap, they're just smaller. And giant cats freak me out. So when I was staying with... So
you're never going to own a tiger?
No, well, maybe a tiger. That would be okay. But you shouldn't own those. You should leave those on reserves. But in any case, when I was staying at Colin Courts back when they lived in the Springs, their cat took to me, and I love dogs, so I was like, Hudson and the pig were cool, but then the cats kept coming on. God damn it! If I have all these pictures with this damn cat that was like sleeping on my face, like it would not get off me.
It was trying to suck your soul out.
It was, but I would wake up in the middle of the night and open my eyes, and there'd be a cat staring at me, and I'm like, what the fuck? I'm freaking out.
Oh boy.
And then Colin saw the problem. He's like, Ursula, just close the door. I'm like, shut up.
Yeah, close the door, turn the phone off. It's amazing what simple solutions there are to these problems in your life that you just seem to ignore.
I don't really see them as problems. You know what? Here's the deal, Greg. I had a child, and you learn how to tune out, extraneous noises around you. So, like, the phone doesn't even bother me because I wouldn't hear it. Like, I wouldn't even pay attention to it. Then
why does it matter if it's off? Because if it's on and you don't hear it anyway, you're still not going to get the call.
Quit trying to use your magic logic shit on me.
Quit trying to be illogical. It's not my fault.
He's the one who cares about the phone. I don't think anybody else cares.
No, everybody else loves listening to podcasts with numerous interruptions and obnoxious noises. I mean, obnoxious noises besides your and my voices. Fuck, we're so dumb.
So fucking close.
The what?
We're so close. We've got one question left.
I know. Let's see if we can actually make it. Okay. Let's see here. I'm just going to read this one again since it's been 45 minutes since I read through these. Keeping the bar close on the turnover has been very difficult for me, and I'm sure many others. I think I have a good position right to the hip and make good contact and know that the bar needs to stay close as if I can smell it as it passes my nose, but I cannot seem to execute the movement even at light weights. Is there any help you might be able to offer? Yes. You got to practice it. I'm a big fan of practicing the turnover of the snatch and the clean independently of the rest of the lift when you're having a problem with it. So this means things like muscle snatches, even muscle cleans, which I don't see done very often. I really like muscle snatches or muscle cleans from the power position or from a high hang position, and then tall snatches and tall cleans. Tall cleans even more so for the clean than, say, muscle cleans, I think work a lot better. But that gives you a chance to really, really focus on the upper body mechanics of that turnover, rather than having to do every single other thing in the lift that's already complicated enough that you're probably already overthinking, and then try to focus on this one little part that is so quick and happens right after an even quicker part of the movement that you're trying to control so closely. So, if I have a lifter who's got problems with this, and I certainly do, before they snatch, we'll do muscle snatches, or we'll do muscle snatches from power position, or we'll do tall snatches, or we'll do a combination of things. And that, I call that a technique primer, where you're doing, some lightweight technique movement right before the movement, that it's intended to correct. And so that tends to carry over better, because you kind of get that feel into their body, instead of just saying, keep the bar close, or pull your elbows up and out before you turn the bar over, whatever cue you're using. So you're doing less talking and less thinking and more practicing of that movement. What say you, Ursula? Quick, before the phone rings.
I do the hip. Well, my neighbor just started edging and the dog's barking. Hip muscle squat snatch is the one that I use. And I have a bunch of lifters and it also helps me as a coach, because I can see exactly how they should be moving in the pull under. And they learn, obviously, exactly how they should be moving in the pull under that keeps them balanced and makes sure that the bar lands over them in the what we call the slot, in the right place. I think another thing that you could try, Greg gave all of the good examples with the what we call pull unders, but tall snatches and tall cleans, as well as, he's talking about snatching, as well as muscle squat snatch, versions of the lift that actually bring the elbow high as an important part of the movement, is a high pull to stick.
Oh, yeah.
That way you can do it, because all of these other exercises have to be done with less weight, a lower percentage, a quite low percentage actually, because of the nature of them. And the snatch pull to a stick helps you. And of course, you're not going to be passing your face, but you really can focus on keeping the bar close through your chest before you get into the pull under portion of it.
Why don't you explain, because that's such an obscure exercise these days. Why don't you explain to people who haven't heard of that what it is?
Okay, so we usually use a squat rack to set up, and we put a PVC or a wooden dowel, and you have your athlete stand either on the balls of their feet, and then you go about mid-chest height, or you could just have them stand flat-footed and put the bar right at their shoulder, which is going to equate to about the same. And you set the stick at that height. So then they put the end of the bar, the collar of the bar, underneath that stick. And of course, you don't need the stick for the lighter weights, but once you get up to about 90%, you have them try to actually do the pull and hit the stick with the end of the bar, so that you're getting a specific height and movement. And John Coffey used to use them a lot, and Robin snatched 2 world records. So I think, and most of the girls on the team were good snatchers. So the good thing about that exercise versus, say, just having someone do high pulls is that a lot of time, if people aren't really proficient with a high pull exercise, they end up leaning their body down toward the bar as they're finishing, versus continuing to really stretch tall and bring the bar up. So that stick ensures that you can't cheat, you can't fool yourself into believing you're getting I'm getting the bar to my sternum, when really you're getting the bar to your stomach, and then you're leaning down to the bar until your sternum touches it. Not that particular variation of a high pull isn't ever appropriate or useful, but if you're doing it in order to really focus on pulling the bar high, then that stick will keep you honest. The other high pull with a stick is that the coach has the stick, and when you fuck it up, you get hit in the back of the calves with it.
Less popular.
Yeah, high pull to
popular among coaches, not as much among athletes.
High pull with the stick, not high pull to the stick.
Yeah, true. That's high pull trying to get away from the stick. Oh boy.
Well, you better let me off this thing before my neighbor starts mowing with the actual mower.
Okay.
I'm on the top story. I can open this window and start throwing things at him if you'd like.
If this were a videoed podcast, then I would like that. But since no one will be able to enjoy that, it's going to be like Fibber McGee and Molly, and they just have to listen to sounds and imagine what's happening. I don't want to talk our way through it. It's not, just doesn't have the same effect. So yes, let's get out of here. Let's let these poor people be. We just stole an hour of their lives. Guys, if you like this podcast,
we can't imagine why.
Yeah, I don't need you to explain why, but if you do, please go review it on iTunes, and tell your friends, tell everybody you know to listen to it, because it makes us feel better to believe that we're not just talking to each other and then recording it for posterity. We would like to believe that people are actually listening to this and being helped by it and enjoying it, maybe even a little bit. So help us spread the word. Anything else you need to mention before we get the heck off this thing?
No.
No. Don't forget to turn your phone back on.
I will not. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Go get some rest.
All right. Y'all have a good one.
Okay, guys. See ya.